Hello, good people of YouTube. Welcome to episode 61 of What Makes This Song Special. As always, I'll be telling you a wee story that reminds me of a song. I will talk a wee bit about the song in question, the singer in question, and then I'll follow up with a part two, as always, that you'll be able to click on at the end, somewhere here or here, which will take you to my cover version of the song. It's an Elton John song today. I know I've done a couple of Elton John songs on the channel already, and I have done a song, an episode of What Makes This Song Special with an Elton John song, but after watching a 76-year-old Elton blow every other act off the stage at Glastonbury just a couple of months back in the summer, I had to do this episode. I had to do another Elton John episode, and this is a really personal one for me. I'm going to get kind of personal with this one, and just another great song that takes me back to something. So this one's going to go back to the summer of 2000, the Millennium Summer. I was in Italy for a couple of months. I was 18 years old. I was away without my mum and dad for the first time, or the first summer of my life. Everything was going great until it wasn't. My mental health issues started to kind of bubble to the surface a few weeks into the trip. And just when I'd been having such a great time, I didn't really have anything to worry about, but I started to worry about worrying, which is, anybody who's ever suffered from anxiety before, you'll understand that, sometimes you just start worrying about, what if I start worrying? What if I start being anxious again? And that whole sort of self-perpetuating vicious cycle begins. So I started to worry about panic attacks returning when I was away on my own and my parents not being there to save the day. I was worrying about the future because all of my friends had headed off to university the summer before, and I was still trying to chase the dream of becoming a famous singer-songwriter, and I was sort of in limbo at this point, and I had a few kind of real worries, I suppose, like that, just feeling like didn't really know what I was doing with my life. But most of the anxiety just came from, as I said before, just stuff that's within you. You start worrying about everything that isn't really needing worried about. It sort of kicked off one evening. I got into a bit of an altercation at the village bar with another guy who was actually there from Scotland as well, believe it or not. And he said something to me that got under my skin, and he definitely meant it to get under my skin, and I lost my temper, and it all turned a bit ugly and a bit physical, and then my adrenaline was just pumping when I left the situation and went home, and I think the adrenaline just set off this chain reaction of demons and everything coming back to the surface, and the anxiety, the what ifs, the obsessive thoughts, and the happy summer was cut short because of all of that. So I was going up to my aunt and uncle's house, my Auntie Lucia and Uncle Antonio. I was going up there for lunch most days, and they were keeping an eye on me if I needed anything. And their daughter, my cousin Mena, who's a wee bit older than me, but she's always been like, a good bit older than me, but she's always been kind of like an aunt figure over there for me when I've gone over the years. And she'd also sort of been asking me if I needed anything, checking in on me, because although I was 18, technically an adult, still just a wee boy. So I confided in her about the panic attacks, and I got her to get me an appointment with the doctor. I just wanted somebody to give me something, a magic potion, a magic pill that would take it all away for a few weeks, just so I could finish my holiday in peace and happiness. And something just to stop the anxiety, the rumination, the obsessive compulsive negative thoughts. And Dr. Ferry, the village doctor, who was an old school friend of my dad's, he prescribed me something that he said would help. I'd never heard of it before. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. I hadn't heard of the drug before. It was called Xanax. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. The most that my doctors in Scotland had been giving me for my anxiety before this had been beta blockers, which are just drugs that help your heart rate slow down, so they can kind of help you take the edge off a little bit, but they're really something you would give to kids with sort of exam anxiety and stuff like that. So I didn't have huge expectations for this Xanax stuff. I thought it would be very similar, and I wasn't expecting it to help much, but hoping that it would take the edge off. I was obviously, how wrong was I? I'd never read much past the initial instructions on the wee pamphlet that you get with the medicine that said to put a couple of drops in water and then drink it before lunch and before dinner. I never realised that you weren't allowed to drink alcohol with it. I never realised that you couldn't drive. I just took it one day before lunch at my aunt and uncle's house and hoped it would take the edge off. My uncle Antonio was pouring me homemade wine as I ate my bowl of pasta, and he'd put a peach from the garden inside the glass of wine, and filled the glass of wine a couple of times. And at the end of the meal, the peach was the dessert, with a wee bit of ice cream, and the peach, this soaked in red wine peach. And when I went to stand up after the meal, my legs just didn't want to support me. But yeah, it was there was no nerves, there was no anxiety, there were no intrusive thoughts. I just felt this kind of hazy, numb relief that I just wanted to sort of retire in. It was amazing. And I went back to the house, fell asleep on top of the bed, and when I woke up, there was a full page of song lyrics that I'd written on a little jotter that I'd taken a couple of jotters from school when I'd left the year before. I'd stolen a few jotters to use as places to write song lyrics and poetry and all that kind of stuff. And there was there's all these lyrics on the page that I don't remember writing, and that's a bit strange. And I thought, God, I must have been really tired and pretty drugged from obviously the Xanax stuff. So, but this happened every day. This started to happen every day for a couple of weeks, along with some other really strange stuff. Like I heard a very clear conversation happening in the room next to me one of the days, even though I was the only one in the house. One of the days I woke up and I saw a woman who was the double of my nonna, who was my dad's mum, who I never sadly got to meet because she passed away before I was born. And it's just such she walked right past the door of my bedroom, and I was, figments of my drugged up state of mind, or was it ghosts, or, who knows, maybe those are stories for another day, but I don't want to drag this one out too much, and there's still a bit of this story to go, so we can ponder on those things another time. But yeah, some really strange stuff happened when I was taking that medication. And the biggest thing was these lyrics that appeared in my little jotter every day, which I ended up naming the Xanax Wine Diaries on the front cover, because it was probably most of them were fueled by drinking wine and taking Xanax. One in particular stands out. I just returned from my usual lunch, fueled with the aforementioned Xanax and red wine, and my mate Luciano Tavoieri turns up with his brand new motorbike. His mum and dad had made a mechanic put a speed limit, like a speed limiter, on it for the first 200 kilometres, so that he had time to learn how to control it properly. But he'd learned or heard a rumour that if you went full speed down a steep hill, you could break the limiter, and then drive at full speed on it. And so he pops by and he says, "Do you want to try it, Ricardo?" He's in his Irish Cork accent, and I was like, "Yeah, why not?" Now I'd barely had a shot on a motorbike in my life, but there was no fear. I wasn't really that fearful a kid from that type of thing anyway, which is weird because obviously suffered from anxiety. I was never really scared of doing silly things like that, climbing crazy trees and doing, tricks on my bike and all that stuff. I was never a worrier in that respect. So I was all in, especially, flooded full of wine and Xanax, not really thinking about the consequences of that beforehand. we jump on the bike. I was wearing a pair of football shorts and trainers, and that was it. No helmet, not even a top on. And we go flying round on this bike around the little country roads in Villa Latina in the midday sun. And he'd come over in the summers for holidays from Ireland as well. His dad was also from the village and had moved to Ireland, to Cork, as I said. But I'd lived there when I was a kid. I knew every road. So I was taking him all these different roads. I'm saying I know the perfect hill for breaking this limiter. And I was a bit dubious about the limiter thing. It sounded like a bit of an urban myth. I wasn't really sure how the limiter worked. Anyway, we get to the top of this really steep hill in the mountains, and we go straight down, full speed. And we seem to have broken the software, because when we get to the bottom, this enigmatic limiter seems to have disappeared, whatever it was. I don't know if it was a software thing, a hardware thing, whatever. And the bike's now going at a much more enjoyable pace, and we're getting, real speed out of it, and we're flying around these bends. He's on the back. And all was going well until we were driving down this country road where I used to play. There was an old football pitch there that I used to play on when I was a kid. And we were passing by the football pitch, and this huge lorry comes round the bend driving straight towards us, and there just wasn't enough space on the road for us and the truck. This huge, I don't know what it was carrying or what it would have been carrying, but a lorry, a big one, and just wide enough for the road itself. And just by chance, there was a little sort of sandy dirt track off to the side. So I pulled in to that road, but the minute the wheels hit the sandy dirt track, we lost control of the bike, and the bike, us hanging onto it, flew through the air, down off the side of the road into a field, and I was dragged along under the bike by my shoulder with Luciano on top of me. And I just thought I was dead for a few seconds. And when we stood up in the field, we just looked at each other in complete disbelief. And Luciano just goes, "Are you alive, boy? You're a terrible colour." And I had I think I must have been green, but I had blood pouring out of my shoulder. And just a mess, blood everywhere. And his bike was all dented and scratched and bashed, and I felt really guilty about that. I felt really bad. But we had avoided something much worse, because that could have been, a fatal accident. And I remember when I got home and cleaned up, I could see the magnitude of the wounds. So I had this hole in my shoulder here, where you could just see the top of the bone. And I knew that I needed hospital assistance, but I couldn't go to the hospital without asking for a lift and telling my family that I'd done the one thing that I'd been asked not to do by my mum, which was go on a motorbike when she was away. So I felt the guilt, I felt the pain for a few days, and this wound got more and more infected and pussy and horrible, and it just wouldn't heal at all. Until one day, about a week later, my cousin Mena asked if I wanted to go to the beach, and we went to the beach for the day. She freaked out when she saw it, and I told her I fell playing football, and I don't think she bought my story. But by the end of that day at the beach, just being in the sea, the shoulder for the first time looked like it was starting to dry out and clean out a little bit, thanks to the good old Mediterranean salt water. Anyway, back to the day it happened. I'd cleaned up the wounds, I'd gone to lie down, and just before I lay down, from nowhere, this huge thunder crash echoed around the mountains. Where we stay in Italy, it's like this it's like a valley, and there are just mountains in every direction. So when the thunder hits, it sort of echoes. It can be really, really loud. So I remember hearing it, and it just felt like the whole house shook. And I went out, and this biblical downpour happened. And I hadn't seen a cloud for nearly 2 months, never mind any rain. And all of a sudden, there's a river flowing down the streets. And I went out just to be in it. I don't know, just that feeling that I wanted to. Usually I hate the rain, but I wanted to go out and just be in it. And I went out into the back garden. And I breathed in the smell that the ground makes when it's been bone dry and then gets wet. And I looked at the mountains in just complete awe because the clouds were right down, sort of halfway, and you could see the peaks above the clouds, and it just looked like something out of another world. It was amazing. Um, and I remember just looking up and wondering what it would be like to live in those mountains, away from everything and everyone. Um, Something that I probably think about still to this day. As many of us, I'm sure, do on days where everything's just a bit much and stress gets in the way. And but I remembered this old folk tale, this old legend that my dad used to tell us about an old monk who'd become a hermit and lived in those mountains on his own. This was a story he used to like to tell us when we were kids, and yeah, I remember just thinking about that. And then, like most other days, I don't remember really going to bed. I don't remember anything other than standing looking at those mountains and thinking about the hermit monk. And then I woke up again with a little notebook full of fresh lyrics. And this time the lyric was about a hermit living in the mountains, wanting to escape the world. But everybody thought he was crazy, and they sent the men in white coats to take him away. And it made perfect sense that the hermit was me, and the lyric was about me facing the terrifying fear of being sort of deemed mentally unstable or something. The things that I worried about back then, because my mental health issues weren't great, and I think when you're like that, especially when you're young, you kind of definitely think that you're the only one that feels like that. People didn't talk about things as much either. This is like 23 years ago, so it's not like people really spoke about mental health issues as much as we do now. It's much better now when everybody's a bit more open about it, but back then I felt very much like I was just this freak of nature, and all my mates were just getting on with life and not worrying about anything, which is probably completely untrue. But my big fear was always kind of like ending up in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was always like this huge fear of mine, and here were these lyrics with a story about it that I'd dreamed up. And so anyway, the holiday finishes, I get back to Scotland. I went to the doctor a few days after I get back, and I asked for a repeat prescription, and he told me that they don't prescribe that medication in the UK. It'd been banned because it was too addictive. He was really shocked that I'd been given it, and he put the real fear in me about it. He told me to go home and get rid of it immediately. So I went home, took the little bottle of Xanax, poured the last of what I had left down the sink, with a real fear in my stomach because it had helped. And this isn't me trying to talk anybody into pharmaceutical drugs. I've never taken drugs ever. And so I've always been too, I suppose, especially when I was young, and that's when these things are offered up, I was too scared to kind of take things that would alter my mind or, take control of me too much. So alcohol was as far as I ever went with it. So going straight from that, never having touched any drugs, to taking something like Xanax, which is quite a powerful pharmaceutical drug. Obviously there were benefits in terms of it just numbed the anxiety level, but yeah, I could see just in those couple of weeks of taking it how people could get extremely addicted to something like that. It's a dangerous drug, and I'm glad that it's been banned in many countries now. But yeah, at the time, I don't know if it's still available in Italy. At the time, it was still available in Italy, not in the UK. So poured it down the sink, and I remember the rain, as always in Scotland. The rain was falling that day, and I went into my piano in my room and I started to play this little riff on the piano. And then I remembered that I had those lyrics in my Xanax Wine Diaries jotter, and I decided to go and get that from my suitcase that I still hadn't unpacked, and I wrote a song called Take Me Away. It kind of just came together itself. The lyric was already there, written by whoever, whatever, that just was on the page when I woke up, and I kind of moved them around a little bit to make it work into a melody, along with this little riff that I'd written, sort of inspired by the rain. And I wrote a song called Take Me Away for my first album, a song that I played at every gig and with every band that I was in for many years before I did the final recording of it. And I had this little great moment where I realised that my drug had to become my ability to write and be creative. and that would be the thing that helped me deal with the stuff in my head. I had to kind of really, I suppose, sort of think every time I felt anxious or felt like there was panic attacks on the way, I just used to think, well, this is part of me being an artist, and I'm going to use that and try and write with it. And that's what I did for for a long time, until I kind of got a lot better at dealing with it. It was always about trying to create something, write lyrics at the time when I was feeling at my worst, to take a positive from a negative. So yeah, I'll leave a link to Take Me Away, because it's one of my favourite songs of mine, of my own compositions. But yeah, there's the story. That's when the song's really important to me because of that. The Madman Across the Water album was the soundtrack to that summer for me. Songs like Leave On, Tiny Dancer, Indian Sunset, Goodbye, but just the title song Madman Across the Water was me that summer. I was the madman across the water. It kind of made sense for me, that lyric, across the channel, from Britain going into Italy, and just kind of losing my mind a little bit towards the end of that summer. I honestly thought I was losing my mind, and now when I look back, that summer has so many great memories. I remember all the funny, great things from it, and as much as I've spoken today about the troubles and the struggles within that summer, those aren't the things that come to my mind most when I think about that summer. I think about all the great times that I had, the friends that I made, just funny things that happened. So I'm able to remember it with happiness, and for the fact that it was a real learning journey, I suppose. So a bit about the song. As I said, it's the title track from the Madman Across the Water album. The album's a masterpiece. If you've not listened to that album, immediately after listening to my cover of Madman Across the Water, go and listen to the album, whatever you usually listen on, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, whatever it is. I think it might be Elton's best album. Hard to decide when he's written so many, but there's something about the energy of Madman. It's got so many great songs that are both epic and intimate, which is a really hard thing to do as a writer. The guy was releasing like 3 albums a year. At that time, at that period, there was about 2 or 3 years in a row around the early to mid 70s that Elton John was writing writing and recording 3 albums a year. Just that it's not even, can't get my head around that. There's no other band or artist, I think, in history that's ever done that. It's certainly not to that level where most of the songs from those albums were also hits. It's just frightening. Just unparalleled genius of Elton John. Just an outrageous singer-songwriter. Amazing. I usually do a vocal coach analysis on the singer. I have done a vocal analysis on Elton John before, so I'll keep it very brief. Incredible range, effortlessness in transitioning from chest to head voice and back. His ability to cover many different styles of music. His ability to sing and play piano like a god all at the same time. His soul, his feel, his emotional connection. Do you need me to keep going? Such an underrated singer, actually. When he was at his peak, he could sing anything, and just an absolute inspiration to me, of course, as a piano player, singer, songwriter. Certainly not in the same league as him, but certainly, very inspired by him. So there's my story. I wore my heart on my sleeve a little bit this week with that one, and it's something I think we should all do, or all try to do more. I know it's hard to talk about things like that sometimes, but mental health issues can be crippling, and you can really suffer and feel desperately alone, even when you're surrounded by great people. But I've always felt that it helps to talk about it. My mum has always said to me that a problem shared is a problem halved. And I think there's a lot of truth in that wee quote. So leave a comment if you're struggling with something, or if this song takes you somewhere in your story of your life, and we can chat about it in the comment section. As always, please like, share, subscribe, hit the link to hear my cover version of today's song, and come back next week for another song and another story. Thank you.